The sky decided to take a full-body fire hose leak all over the spine of West Virginia. This wasn't your garden variety drizzle, the kind that makes you feel poetic while you sip coffee. This wasn't some romantic movie shower where the hero and heroine finally kiss. This was a full-blown, Old Testament, get-your-ark-ready kind of downpour. The kind of rain that has a weight to it, that hits the roof of your cab, not with a pitter-patter, but with the thudding rhythm of 1,000 angry fists. The wipers on my Kenworth, which I call the Beast, were going at it like a couple of caffeinated woodpeckers on a metal roof, and they were still losing the war. Thwack, thwump, thwack, thwump. It was a hypnotic, losing battle against the deluge. Visibility was maybe 20 feet past my own chrome hood ornament. A big angry bulldog I called Winston. Winston was snarling at the storm, his chrome jowls perpetually fixed in a look of pure, unadulterated defiance. I respected that. He got me. Frankly, I couldn't have given less of a damn. Inside my cab, it was a fortress of solitude. My fortress of solitude. The Cummins engine was humming, a low, steady baritone, a deep rumble that vibrated right up through the floorboards and into the soles of my boots. It was a tune that meant money and miles, the song of my life. The heater was blasting out air hotter than a $2 pistol on the 4th of July, a dry, glorious heat that smelled faintly of burning dust and engine coolant. The whole place smelled like the Holy Trinity. Freedom, diesel, and the half-eaten masterpiece sitting on my dash. It was a double bacon cheeseburger, a glorious greasy tower of perfection from a little roadside joint back in Charleston called the Hubcap. Place was run by a woman named Flo, who looked like she'd been wrestling bears her whole life and won every single time. She had arms like redwood stumps and a laugh that could scare birds out of trees, and she made a burger that could make a grown man weep with joy. I saw a guy do it once. Some fancy fella in a suit, probably a lawyer, took one bite and just started leaking from the eyes. Flo just slapped him on the back so hard he almost choked and yelled, "That's the good stuff, ain't it, slick?" The cheese was a perfect gooey lava flow of American and cheddar, melting down the sides of the thick, hand-formed patties. The bacon was so crispy it shattered when you looked at it, releasing a cloud of salty, smoky perfume. The bun was a toasted brioche, strong enough to hold the whole beautiful mess together, but soft enough to yield to the slightest pressure. It was a work of art, and I was its devoted patron. I was a happy man, a 300-pound king lounging on his custom-stitched leather throne in a rolling castle. The radio was crackling out some classic rock, some tune about a long, cool woman in a black dress. Seemed about right for a lonely night on the road. This is the part of the job they never put in the recruitment brochures. The peace, the quiet power. Just you, your rig, and 1,000 miles of open road. Or in this particular case, 1,000 miles of waterlogged, potholed asphalt that was trying its best to swallow cars whole. I took another huge bite of my burger, chewing with my mouth open because who was going to stop me? Winston the bulldog sure as hell didn't care. Juice and a little bit of melted cheese dripped down my chin and onto the front of my shirt, joining the constellation of past meals. It was a badge of honor. Life was good. Real good. Then I saw it. Cutting through the gray wall of rain, a faint rhythmic blinking. Amber. Hazard lights. A four-wheeler, pulled over on the shoulder, looking as sad and pathetic as a wet kitten left out in the yard. My first thought was a long, drawn-out, "aw, nuts." My second thought was about the burger. It was at peak deliciousness. The heat from the patty had perfectly softened the cheese. The bacon was at maximum crisp. The bun was holding on for dear life. Stopping now would be a culinary tragedy. Protocol, and just being a decent human being, says you pull over, you check on 'em, make sure it ain't a family with a baby on board, or some old folks who are scared out of their wits. But my burger was hitting that perfect temperature equilibrium, and the cab was just so damn cozy. The thought of opening that door and letting the hurricane in was physically painful. I could already feel the cold, wet fingers of the storm trying to pry their way into my warm, dry paradise. I let out a sigh that fogged up the side window, a big, theatrical, put-upon sigh. Duty calls, Sam McCarty, Knight of the Road, at your service. I flicked on my turn signal, a sound like a ticking clock counting down to my discomfort. As I slowed the big 18-wheeler down, the air brakes hissed and coughed like a giant metallic dragon clearing its throat. The sound was a symphony of compressed air and power, a noise that always made me feel like I was piloting something more than just a truck. My headlights, powerful enough to signal ships at sea, swept across the scene like a prison spotlight, cutting a huge swath of daylight through the dark, rainy night. It was one of them little convertible sports cars, a bright red one, a Mazda Miata or something similar. Looked fast and expensive, the kind of car a dentist buys during a midlife crisis to feel young again. A completely stupid choice for a state with weather that had a personality disorder. The fabric top was up, but it probably leaked like a rusty bucket. It looked tiny and fragile next to the sheer scale of my rig, and standing next to it, shivering in the deluge, were two figures, two women. My foot, which had been pressing the brake with reluctant duty, suddenly got a lot more interested. The pressure eased, then became more deliberate, more focused. The truck rolled to a slow, creeping stop about 50 feet behind their car. My high beams painted them in a perfect, bright, white light. And let me tell you, my heart didn't just skip a beat. It kicked over the whole damn drum kit, lit it on fire, and did a guitar solo on the ashes. My burger was forgotten. Flo and her greasy masterpiece were a distant memory. My world had just tilted on its axis. They were twins, had to be, identical. Same long dark hair plastered to their faces and necks, in slick black ropes. Same big panicked eyes staring into my lights like startled fawns. They looked to be in their early 20s, fresh out of college, and into a world of trouble. And they were soaked. I don't mean a little damp. I don't mean they'd forgotten their umbrella. I mean they looked like they'd just been used to mop the floor of a public swimming pool after a week-long swim meet. Here's the part that short-circuited my brain, sent a surge of electricity through my system that made my toes curl inside my boots. They were both wearing little white T-shirts, the kind of thin, cheap ones you buy in a 3-pack at Walmart. And now, thanks to Mother Nature's biblical temper tantrum, those T-shirts had ceased all function as clothing. They were more like a second skin, a completely transparent second skin, clinging to every single curve, every line, every detail, like they were shrink-wrapped for freshness. Underneath, I could see the clear, perfect outline of, well, let's just say they weren't bundled up for a West Virginia winter. The lingerie was lacy, delicate, and doing absolutely nothing to hide the goods. The same unfortunate, or fortunate, depending on your perspective, situation was happening with the little denim shorts they had on, soaked, tight, and leaving absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, to the imagination. They turned in perfect, beautiful sync, shielding their eyes from my blinding headlights. They looked like a couple of scared, gorgeous, and very, very cold deer. I swallowed the half-chewed bite of burger in my mouth. It went down like a ball of gravel, my cozy little world, My rolling paradise of diesel fumes and rock and roll had just been invaded by two walking, talking pin-up calendars that had been caught in a car wash. I fumbled for the CB radio handset, then realized how dumb that was. I hit the button for the external speaker, a feature I usually only use to yell at idiots who cut me off. You two ladies all right over there?" My voice boomed out over the storm, scratchier and deeper than I intended, like I was the voice of God asking about their car trouble. It probably scared the hell out of them. One of them, the one on the left, took a hesitant step forward, cupping her hands around her mouth to be heard over the roar. "Our car just died." "It won't start," she yelled, her voice thin and reedy against the roar of the rain and my idling engine. "It's flooded or something. We're freezing," the other one shouted, hugging herself tight. It was a gesture of pure misery, but it had the unintended side effect of making the T-shirt situation even more pronounced. My eyes widened. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck that had nothing to do with the heater. My brain was having a three-way civil war. Brain part one, the professional trucker, was saying, "Help them. Get them to the next town. Be a gentleman, Sam. Your mama raised you right." Brain part two, the 300-pound, red-blooded American male part, was screaming, "Holy hell, Sam. This is the moment your entire life has been building towards. Do not screw this up. This is your Super Bowl." And Brain, part three, had apparently clocked out for the night, leaving behind nothing but a dial tone and a faint smell of burnt toast. I decided to listen to Brain part one, for now. The other stuff, well, a man can dream, can't he? A man can hope. "All right, hang tight. I'm coming over," I yelled back, hoping they heard me over the cacophony. I grabbed my biggest mag light, a heavy black club of a flashlight that could double as a weapon, threw on my yellow rain slicker, which smelled perpetually of old rain and truck stop coffee, and took a deep breath before opening the driver's side door. The second I did, the storm hit me like a blitzing linebacker. The wind ripped the door from my hand, slamming it against its hinges with a painful groan. Cold rain coming in sideways stung my face and neck. The glorious toasty warmth of my cab was sucked out into the night, like it was being vacuumed into space. Cursing under my breath, I slammed the door shut and hustled over, my heavy boots splashing in ankle-deep puddles that were forming on the shoulder. Up close, the situation was even more ridiculous. They were shivering violently, their teeth chattering so hard I could hear it over the rain. They were even prettier than they looked from 50 feet away. Little button noses, big brown eyes full of genuine panic, and lips that were turning an alarming shade of blue. They looked up at me, this giant of a man in a greasy rain jacket, like I was a knight in shining armor, an armor that smelled faintly of diesel and French fries. The car just sputtered and died, one of them said, her voice trembling so much she could barely get the words out. "We tried calling for help, but there's no service out here at all." Her phone was in her hand, screen dark and useless. Can you possibly give us a ride?" the other one asked, her voice a hopeful whisper. She looked up at me, water dripping from her long eyelashes, and it was a look that could melt steel. It was the kind of look that could make a man promise to do anything. "Just to the next town. There has to be a motel or something, right? I'm no mechanic, especially not for these fancy foreign jobs with their computers and plastic parts, but I leaned over and shined my mag light on the car's engine. I didn't need a degree from MIT to see the problem. The engine bay looked like a swimming pool. The air intake had probably sucked up a gallon of water. This little red sports car wasn't going anywhere tonight. It was done for. Yeah, she's done for, I said, trying to sound cool and in charge, like I handle this kind of thing every day, like I wasn't currently having a minor heart attack. Water in the intake, no problem at all. Hop in my rig, it's warm, we'll get you sorted out. The relief that washed over their faces was instantaneous and blinding. It was like I'd just told them they'd won the lottery and a lifetime supply of puppies. Their whole bodies seemed to sag with it. "Oh, thank you so much," they said, in perfect unnerving unison. It was kinda creepy, but in a very, very hot way. "Name's Sam," I grunted, gesturing with my head toward the towering, shadowy shape of my truck. "Let's get you out of this monsoon." "I'm Chloe," said the one on the left, who seemed to be the designated talker. She managed a small, shivering smile. "And I'm Zoe," said the one on the right, who was still hugging herself for warmth, looking at my truck like it was the Taj Mahal. Chloe and Zoe, of course, Sounded like names from one of those teen dramas my ex-wife used to watch. Perfect pretty names for perfect, pretty girls. I led them back to the beast. Getting into a Kenworth isn't like getting into a car. It's more like climbing a piece of playground equipment. There are 3 steep steps and a couple of grab handles. I opened the passenger door and gave Chloe a hand up. As I hoisted her up the steps, my big, calloused hand wrapped around her upper arm. Her skin was ice-cold and slick with rain, but holy smokes, it was smooth. I felt a jolt go right through my arm, a little zap of electricity that had nothing to do with the storm. She scrambled inside, and then Zoe followed, a little less gracefully, nearly slipping on the wet metal step. I gave her a steadying push on the backside, a purely professional and gentlemanly push, of course, and she tumbled into the cab next to her sister. I climbed back into my driver's seat, shaking water off my jacket like a wet dog and feeling like I'd just kicked a game-winning field goal in the Super Bowl. The heavy door sealed shut behind me with a solid, reassuring thunk, and the roar of the storm was instantly muffled, reduced to a distant drumming on the roof. The cab was once again a sanctuary, filled with the hum of the engine, the blast of the heater, and a new scent, a mix of rain, expensive-smelling shampoo, and female. The cab, which had felt so big and empty just 5 minutes ago, now felt crowded, intimate, in a very, very good way. They were huddled together on the wide passenger seat, which was really more of a bench, dripping a small lake onto the leather upholstery. I didn't care. I'd have let them hose down the whole interior if they'd asked. They were still shivering, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. "Oh my God, it's so warm in here," Chloe sighed, and a little cloud of vapor escaped her lips as she spoke. She held her hands directly in front of the vent, trying to thaw her fingers. Can you turn the heat up even more?" Zoe asked, her teeth still chattering. "I feel like my bones are frozen solid." "You got it," I said, my voice coming out a little too eager. I reached for the dash and cranked the temperature knob all the way to the red zone. The fan kicked into a higher gear, roaring like a miniature jet engine and pumping out air that felt like it was coming straight from the devil's furnace. "Thank you," they both whispered, huddling closer to the vents, their shoulders pressed together. I put the rig in gear, released the air brakes with a final mighty hiss, and slowly, carefully, pulled the massive truck back onto the highway. The wipers were still fighting their losing battle, but I wasn't looking at the road as much as I should have been. My attention was split. 90% of it was on the 2 shivering, beautiful women sitting 5 feet away from me. The whole atmosphere inside the cab had shifted. It was no longer just my cozy man cave. It was now a rolling, mobile sauna, filled with the scent of their perfume and the sight of their shivering, half-exposed bodies. I took a sideways glance. The color was starting to return to their faces. The intense heat was doing its job. It was also creating steam. Little wisps of it were visibly rising from their wet clothes, from their hair, as the water evaporated. The windows, already a little foggy from the temperature difference, were beginning to look like a shower door. It was like we were in our own private bubble, hurtling through the storm. "You girls from around here?" I asked, forcing myself to make small talk, forcing myself to act like a normal, non-ogling human being. It was the hardest acting job of my life. "Just passing through," Chloe said. She was starting to relax, uncurling from her tight ball. She ran a hand through her soaking wet hair, pushing it back from her face. "We were driving from school back to our parents' place for the summer. We go to UVA. We thought we could beat the storm." "Bad bet," I grunted, allowing a small smile. "This ain't a storm you beat. You just gotta hunker down and wait it out. She's the boss." "You're telling me?" Zoe laughed. It was a nice musical laugh. "My butt is completely numb from the cold. I can't feel it." She shifted on the leather seat, trying to get comfortable, and my eyes flickered over for a split second. The thin, wet fabric of her shorts was practically transparent in the glow of the dashboard lights. I snapped my gaze back to the road, my face suddenly feeling as hot as the heater vents. "Come on, Sam. Be cool. Be a professional. Don't be the creepy trucker from a horror movie. Be the hero. Heroes don't stare." "We really need to get out of these wet clothes," Chloe said, looking at her sister with a serious expression. Her voice was matter-of-fact. "We're going to get pneumonia." My knuckles went bone white on the steering wheel. My breath caught in my throat. "Okay, this is it. The point of no return. Stay calm. Do not, under any circumstances, jackknife this 18-wheeler into a ditch." My internal monologue was screaming. There's a blanket back in the sleeper," I said, my voice an octave higher than usual. I cleared my throat, trying to sound nonchalant. "Clean one. Just put it on this morning. If you want to, dry off." "Oh, that's a fantastic idea," Zoe said, her eyes lighting up with genuine relief. She immediately turned to her sister, and without a moment's hesitation, started unbuttoning her shorts. Right there, in the passenger seat. Her cold fingers fumbled with the wet metal button, the sound of the zipper a loud rasp in the quiet cab. She peeled the soaked denim down her legs, the fabric clinging stubbornly to her skin, before finally coming free. I became intensely fascinated by the white lines on the highway. I stared at them like they held the secrets to the universe. Thwack thwump went the wipers. My heart was pounding out the same frantic rhythm against my ribs. "This is so embarrassing," Chloe said, but her tone held zero embarrassment. It was playful, teasing. "But you have no idea how good this heat feels on your skin." I heard the rustle of wet fabric, the soft sound of denim being peeled off skin. I risked a half-second glance in the passenger side mirror. Zoe was wiggling out of her soaked shorts, leaving her in just that ridiculously see-through t-shirt and a tiny pair of pink, lacy panties that were probably just as wet. Then she started peeling the t-shirt over her head. For a brief, glorious half-second, I saw a flash of pale skin, the elegant curve of her back, the line of her spine. And then she was quickly wrapping herself in the thick wool blanket I had pointed towards, which Chloe had fetched from the sleeper pass-through. Chloe, in turn, handed her wet clothes to her sister and began to do the same, unzipping her own shorts with a decisive tug. The methodical, no-nonsense way they went about it was somehow even more breathtaking than if they'd been shy about it. The cab was getting seriously steamy now. The windows were almost completely opaque. It was like we were in our own little world, a bubble of heat and humidity and unspoken things rolling down the dark highway. "Your truck is so nice, Sam," Chloe said, her voice soft and close. She had draped her wet shirt over the dashboard, right next to my poor, forgotten burger. My masterpiece was now a neighbor to a wet piece of lingerie. I felt a strange mix of sacrilege and excitement. "It's so big," she added, drawing the word out. "And powerful." I let out a nervous chuckle. "She gets the job done." "I'll bet she does," Zoe murmured from behind her sister, her voice muffled by the blanket she was now cocooned in. I felt a hand on my right arm. It was Chloe. Her fingers were still a little cold, but they sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a jolt, straight to the core. She hadn't put the blanket on yet, still in her own underwear and bra, seemingly waiting. "Thank you again for stopping, Sam," she said, her voice dropping lower, becoming more intimate. "You're our hero." "Just doing my job, ma'am," I managed to say, trying to sound like a grizzled professional road warrior. My voice cracked on the word job. "Damn it." Zoe leaned forward from behind her sister, her chin resting near Chloe's shoulder. Now I had two identical sets of big brown eyes staring at me from the passenger seat. It was surreal, disorienting, and fantastic. "It's still so cold, though," Zoe said, pouting a little. It was a championship-level pout, the kind that could get a man to confess to crimes he didn't commit, even with the heater blasting like this. "Yeah," Chloe agreed, her fingers gently, absent-mindedly squeezing my bicep. "Body heat is the best way to get warm, you know. It's science." My brain, which had been attempting a heroic comeback, finally just packed its bags, put up an out-of-office sign, and left the building. All systems were offline. I was flying blind, powered only by pure, unfiltered, 300-pound instinct. The dial tone was back, and this time it was playing a damn love song. Is that so?" I managed to croak out, my throat suddenly as dry as a desert. They both hummed in unison, a sound that vibrated right through me, a stereo hum of pure suggestion. Zoe leaned even closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than the roaring engine and the pounding rain. "You have a bed back there, right, Sam? In the sleeper?" I just nodded. I couldn't form words. My tongue felt thick and useless. My head bobbed up and down like one of those dashboard dogs. "We were thinking," Chloe began, her thumb now tracing little lazy circles on my arm, sending sparks up to my shoulder. "Maybe the three of us could get a lot warmer back there, all huddled together." I looked from Chloe's face to Zoe's. They both had the exact same look in their eyes, a playful, mischievous, and incredibly direct look. There was no misunderstanding this. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some friendly misunderstanding. This was real. Two gorgeous, nearly naked identical twins were propositioning me in the cab of my truck, in the middle of the worst storm of the century. Some guys have all the luck. Tonight, it looked like I was some guys. "The next rest stop is about a mile up the road," I said, my voice suddenly steady and calm. The captain was back on the bridge, all hands on deck. "It's usually pretty empty this time of night. I can pull the rig over for a bit. Let the worst of this storm pass." The smiles they gave me in return could have melted the damn engine block. They were twin suns rising in the dark cab, chasing away all the shadows. "That sounds perfect," Zoe whispered, her voice full of promise. I flicked my turn signal on. The little green arrow blinked rhythmically on the dash, illuminating their expectant faces. It blinked on Chloe's hand, still resting on my arm. It blinked on Zoe's hopeful eyes. It was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. With a steady hand, I steered the big Kenworth off the highway and into the dark, empty expanse of the rest area, parking way in the back, under the deep shadow of some big oak trees, far from the single flickering lamppost that was losing its own battle against the storm. I killed the headlights, but left the engine and the heater running. The only light now came from the soft green glow of the dashboard instruments. I turned in my seat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to get out. "All right," I said, my voice low and thick. "Let's get you girls warmed up." The journey from the front seats into the sleeper cab of a Kenworth is not a graceful maneuver under the best of circumstances. It involves hoisting yourself over a wide center console that's a minefield of cup holders, gear shifts, and a CB radio. For one person, it's awkward. For 3 people, 2 of whom are wrapped in a single blanket and giggling, it's a full-blown comedic ballet. Zoe went first. "Whoa!" she yelped, losing her balance as she tried to navigate the console. She tumbled over it with a soft thud, landing in a heap on the mattress in the back. A wave of unrestrained musical laughter followed. Chloe was next. She was more coordinated, moving with a slinky cat-like grace that made my mouth go dry. She slid past me, her hip brushing against my shoulder, and the heat that came off her skin was electric. She settled in next to her sister on the surprisingly spacious bed, leaving a gap in the middle, a Sam-sized gap, an invitation. They both looked at me from the darkness of the sleeper, their eyes wide and shining in the faint green light from the dash. "Your turn, hero," Chloe said, patting the mattress with an open palm. "I'm a big guy. I'm not fat. I'm powerful. 300 pounds of prime American beefcake. Getting my frame over that console was like trying to fit a grizzly bear through a mail slot." I grunted, twisted, and contorted myself, my knee accidentally slamming against the center of the steering wheel. The horn blared for a split second, a loud, sharp beep that sliced through the night, making all 3 of us jump out of our skin. We froze, staring at each other in wide-eyed panic for a heartbeat, and then we all burst out laughing. A deep, rumbling laugh from me, and high-pitched, infectious giggles from them. The tension was gone, shattered by a moment of pure, ridiculous slapstick. It was the perfect icebreaker. "Smooth moves, big guy," Zoe giggled, grabbing my arm and pulling me the rest of the way in. I finally collapsed onto the mattress between them. The space was tight, incredibly tight. My shoulders were pressed firmly against theirs. Our legs were a hopeless, tangled mess of denim, bear skin, and blanket. The sleeper, which usually felt like a cozy little hotel room on wheels, now felt like a phone booth stuffed with 3 people in a steam room. The heater was still blasting, and with 3 bodies crammed into the enclosed space, the temperature was skyrocketing. The windows were completely opaque with condensation. We were in our own private, steamy little world. "See?" Chloe whispered, her breath hot and moist against my ear. "Warmer already." She was right. The shivering had completely stopped. It had been replaced by a different kind of energy. A heavy, charged stillness. The only sounds were the steady drumming of the rain on the roof of the cab, the low hum of the engine, and the sound of our own breathing, which was getting deeper and more ragged by the second. I was lying on my back, a human sandwich between 2 identical slices of heaven. Zoe, on my right, propped herself up on her elbow, her long dark hair falling across my chest like a silk curtain. She traced a single, delicate finger down my sternum, over the fabric of my damp shirt. "You're so big and strong, Sam," she murmured, her voice a low purr. "I feel so tiny next to you." "I feel so safe in here," Chloe added from my left. She snuggled closer, her body pressing against my entire side. Even through my shirt and her blanket, I could feel the intense heat radiating from her. She laid her head on my shoulder, her lips just inches from my neck. Safe and really, really hot. My mind was a perfect, beautiful blank slate. All higher thought processes had ceased to function. It was just sensation. The feeling of Zoe's finger drawing lazy electric circles on my chest. The feeling of Chloe's warm breath on my skin. The incredible, overwhelming scent of their perfume mixed with the rain and the heat. The sheer impossible reality of being sandwiched between two identical, beautiful women who were looking at me like I was the last burger on earth. Zoe leaned down, and her lips brushed against mine. It was a light, tentative, exploratory kiss, but it sent a shockwave through my entire system. My hands, which had been lying uselessly at my sides like a couple of dead fish, came up as if on their own accord. One found her waist, pulling her closer. The other tangled itself in Chloe's damp, soft hair. Then Chloe kissed my neck. Not a peck. A slow, deliberate, open-mouthed kiss that made the hairs on my arms stand up on end and sent a shiver down my spine. "We really do need to thank you properly," she whispered against my skin, her voice husky, "for saving us." And just like that, the dam broke. The situation escalated from a slow burn to a full-blown forest fire. It became a dizzying, glorious blur of tangled limbs, soft skin, and whispered words. It was a three-person wrestling match in the dark, fueled by gratitude and spontaneous combustion. The small space of the sleeper cab became the epicenter of a personal heat wave. The windows were dripping with condensation on the inside, the rain still hammering down on the outside, creating a perfect shield of privacy. Just as things were reaching a critical point-of-no-return intensity, a brilliant white light swept across the cab, illuminating the condensation on the windows like a movie screen. Headlights. We all froze instantly. My heart slammed to a dead stop. Through a small clear patch on the windshield that hadn't fogged over, I saw it. A car was pulling into the rest stop. A police car. A state trooper doing his rounds. The blue and red lights weren't flashing, but the stark white of the Ford Explorer with the state crest on the door was unmistakable. He was pulling in slow, scanning the parking lot. And he was parking just a few spots away from us. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Shh," I hissed, my body rigid as a board. The trooper's car came to a stop. He killed his headlights, plunging us back into near-total darkness, but we all knew he was there, watching. The engine of his car was a low rumble, a counterpoint to my own truck's idle. A minute passed. It felt like an hour. My mind was racing, running through 1,000 horrible scenarios. Just a routine check. He'll move on. Don't make a sound. Don't even breathe. Please, God, don't let him be bored. The forced stillness was a new kind of torture, a new kind of intimacy. We were a frozen sculpture of tangled limbs, holding our breath, listening. Zoe's hand was clamped tight on my shoulder, her nails digging in slightly. Chloe was pressed so hard against me I could feel her heart beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a perfect match for my own. Then a beam of light cut through the darkness, a flashlight. The trooper was out of his car. The beam swept across the parking lot, across the bathrooms, and then it started moving toward my truck. My blood ran cold. "Sam," Zoe breathed, her voice barely audible, a puff of terrified air against my ear. The light hit the passenger side window, a bright, probing circle on the fogged-up glass. It lingered there. He couldn't see in, not with the condensation. But what if he knocked? What if he heard something? My entire career, my freedom, my commercial driver's license, flashed before my eyes. Explaining this situation was not an option. Officer, you see, their car broke down, and they were cold, and body heat is science." It was a one-way ticket to jail and the National Registry of Weirdos. The beam moved up, across the windshield, then over to my driver's side door. I could hear the crunch of his boots on the wet gravel getting closer and closer. I shut my eyes, bracing for the inevitable, sharp rap of a fist on my window. I imagined the conversation, the cuffs, the sheer career-ending humiliation. The girls would be fine, probably just get a warning. Me, I'd be the West Virginia trucker twins guy on the news for a week. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft patter of the rain. "Come on, buddy, just go away. Go find a donut shop. There's nothing to see here, just a tired trucker getting his legally required rest." The beam of his light stayed fixed on my window. I could see the halo of it through my eyelids. I felt a drop of sweat trickle down my temple. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps crunched away. The flashlight beam swept away from my truck. I heard his car door open, then shut with a distant click. A moment later, the trooper's engine revved, and his taillights pulled out of the rest stop, disappearing back onto the highway. He was gone. A collective sigh of relief filled the cab, a huge, shared exhalation of breath we'd all been holding. We stared at each other in the darkness, our eyes wide. The danger had passed, and in its wake, it had left something else. The fear, the adrenaline, the forced, silent intimacy. It had cranked the temperature from a forest fire to a full-blown volcano. Chloe let out a shaky, breathless laugh. "Oh my God, I thought I was going to have a heart attack." "That," Zoe whispered, leaning in and kissing me hard, a kiss full of adrenaline and relief, "was the hottest thing that has ever happened to me." The relief was explosive. The action resumed, but now with a new, frantic, celebratory energy. It was like we'd survived a near-death experience, and the only way to celebrate was to drain every last drop of life out of the moment. The cab was rocking so hard, I was half expecting a knock on the door from a different cop, wondering if we were having an earthquake. It was chaotic. It was clumsy. It was hilarious. It was the most intense, mind-blowing experience of my entire life. They were insatiable, a mirror image of playful, demanding energy. It was like being the sole judge at a food festival where both contestants had made the world's greatest burger. I didn't know where to turn, what to taste first. All I knew was that I was starving, and this was a feast for a king. I don't know how long we were back there. Time had ceased to exist. There was only the before, the cop, and the glorious, sweaty after. The rain started to soften, the torrential downpour easing into a steady, gentle rhythm. The drumming on the roof became a soft, soothing patter. Slowly, gradually, the frenzy subsided. We were left in a heap, breathing heavily, our bodies slick with sweat and satisfaction. I was lying on my back, completely and utterly spent, with a twin draped over each side of me, their heads resting on my chest. The cab was quiet, except for our ragged breaths and the gentle hum of the engine. Zoe lifted her head, her hair a wild, tangled mess. "Wow," she breathed out. It was a simple word, but it held a universe of meaning. Chloe just sighed contentedly, snuggling closer into the crook of my arm. Best roadside assistance ever. I couldn't even form a sentence. I just lay there, a goofy, triumphant, exhausted grin plastered on my face, feeling like the undisputed king of the entire goddamn world. I felt like I'd just hauled 1,000,000 pounds of freight over the Rockies with one hand tied behind my back, and done it in record time. I was drained and happier than I had ever been in my life. The first hint of dawn was starting to creep into the sky, turning the blackness outside into a deep, bruised purple, then a soft gray. The rain had stopped completely, leaving behind a world that was washed clean and dripping diamonds from every leaf and guardrail. "The storm's over," Chloe said softly, sitting up and stretching with a languid grace that made my tired muscles ache in the best way. She looked around the chaotic sleeper cab, at the tangled blankets and discarded clothes, and she just laughed, a pure, happy sound that filled the small space. Zoe joined in. I found myself chuckling along with them, a low rumble in my chest. It was absurd. The whole night was completely and beautifully absurd. "We should probably find that motel now," Zoe said, stretching like a cat. The dim morning light caught the elegant curve of her back, and my brain gave a final, weary little spark of appreciation. They started to get dressed, moving with a casual, unhurried air that amazed me. For them it seemed like this was just a fun, crazy story they'd tell their friends someday. For me, it was a core memory being burned directly into the hard drive of my soul. They pulled on their clothes, which were now mostly dry, thanks to the furnace I called a heater. With a groan, I clumsily climbed back over the console and into my driver's seat. The cab was still thick with the scent of them, a heady mix of perfume and heat and us. The windows were still fogged, but I wiped a patch clear with my sleeve and saw the world outside starting to come into focus. I started the rig and pulled out of the rest stop, back onto the wet, empty highway. A mile down the road, just like I'd said, a glowing neon sign appeared through the morning mist. The Pinewood Motel, vacancy. I pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot. It was a classic, one-story, U-shaped kind of place. Simple, clean enough. I put the truck in park, the air brakes hissing one last time. "Well," I said, my voice still a little hoarse. "Here you are, civilization." They both leaned over the console at the same time. First, Chloe gave me a quick, sweet kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, Sam, for everything." Then Zoe did the same, but her kiss lingered a moment longer, her lips soft against my rough stubble. "Don't be a stranger," she said with a devilish wink. They didn't ask for my number. They didn't give me theirs. It was a perfect, self-contained moment in time, and we all knew it. To ask for more would be to ruin it. They just grabbed their things, opened the door, and hopped down from the cab. They gave me one last wave, both of them, in perfect, smiling unison, before disappearing into the motel office, the little bell over the door tinkling behind them. I sat there for a long minute, just staring at the motel door. The sun was properly up now, casting a warm golden light over the wet pavement. The world smelled fresh and new. I took a deep breath. The cab smelled like them. I looked over at the passenger seat. There was a faint, damp outline on the leather where they had sat. And on my dashboard, next to my now cold and forgotten cheeseburger, was a small, white T-shirt. They'd forgotten one. Or maybe, just maybe, they'd left it on purpose. I picked it up. It was still slightly damp. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. A souvenir from the best damn night of my life. A trophy. I put the beast in gear. I pulled out of the motel parking lot. turning the big rig back toward the interstate, the engine rumbling with contentment. I rolled down my window, letting the cool, clean morning air rush in. It felt good. I was alone again. Just me, my rig, and 1,000 miles of road stretching out before me. But something was different. I felt 10 feet tall. I felt bulletproof. I felt like the luckiest son of a bitch on 4 continents. I reached over and grabbed the handset for my CB radio. Breaker 19. I said into the mic, a huge, stupid grin spreading across my face. This is Big Sam, heading eastbound and down, and let me tell you, boys, it is a beautiful damn morning. I clicked off the radio, cranked up the classic rock station until the speakers rattled, and pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The engine roared to life, and I flew down the highway, chasing the rising sun. First stop. The first greasy spoon I could find with a triple-decker bacon cheeseburger on the menu. A king's gotta have his celebratory